let me start maybe with one question to both of you. 2024 is ending slowly but surely. It was a year of transition for the European institution. We have now a new commission. How do you both see Europe and especially the EU today? Shall we start with the EU ambassador?
Yes, thank you, Raphaël. The transition is now over. The Commission has taken up its duties. It has received a vote of confidence from the European Parliament, so work can begin for the new Commission. And it is fair to say that we are living in a very, very challenging world. Europe has not known such challenges for decades. We have security challenges to our east, but also to the south. We are faced with a world that has completely changed compared to the world we thought we knew over coming previous decades. We are no longer at peace. We are also not sure on whether we can rely on alliances. The globalization model of free trade is also put into question. One has to admit that Europe has been naive, some would say greedy, and we have created dependencies on Russia for our energy, on China for our economy, and on our ally across the Atlantic for our security. And none of these can be taken for granted, which means that Europe has to stand on its own 2 feet. We have to be able to take greater care of ourselves. And all of that will have a cost. Security doesn't come cheap. This de-risking strategy in which we are engaged will also have a cost. Globalization has enabled a greater access on cheaper products. Products are produced where they are cheaper or more efficient. This has, of course, led to a lot of tensions, but it had a lot of advantages as well. And, conversely, reversing or even partially globalization through a de-risking strategy will have a cost. And security, again, we have to admit that, we have relied on others. We have sufficiently invested in our own security. And now these days are over. We are investing, our member states are investing more and more on their security, and that has to continue. And of course, the other challenges with which we are faced, climate change, the economy, we have to make our economies more competitive, an aging population, which has a lot of consequences in terms of healthcare, expenditure, pensions, but also a shrinking workforce. We talk a lot about, migration and the problems seemingly associated with migration, but very soon I think we will be competing on who will be able to be a more attractive destination for a shrinking workforce, a shrinking qualified workforce in Europe. So all of these are challenges with which we will have to grapple. Am I optimistic? Yes, I think that, as Jean Monnet used to say, l'Europe se fera par les crises. You know, it is when crises occur that we show what we are capable of. And we have demonstrated that in the recent past, during this first von der Leyen Commission, by successfully tackling huge challenges. First, the COVID crisis, and then the Ukraine war. In areas, I have to always recall that, where Europe, the EU, did not have any particular competences, neither in the area of public health, fighting pandemics. This is typically a member state competence, but you know, once we started, our member states started closing borders to protect themselves from the virus, they realized that with closed borders, our populations would starve, that you know, if you put obstacles to the single market, populations would starve, and that goes for Switzerland as well. And also, you know, when the war broke out in Ukraine, when the invasion of Ukraine took place, we suddenly were able to find unanimity on a subject that was always very, very controversial. I'm talking about Russia. It was the most divisive issue within the Council of Ministers, and faced with this humongous challenge of seeing a European democracy being attacked, we found the will to provide assistance through national means, but more importantly through EU means. You know, billions of euros of military assistance paid through the EU budget. If you had told me that 3 years ago, I would have said, no, that's impossible. We cannot do that. Member states will never agree to that. So yes, we have been able to overcome challenges in the past, and we must do so in the future. I mean, the threats are really existential. The way is there. I mean, there is the Draghi, the Letta reports, which show us the way. Now we have to find the political will to do what it takes to bite the bullet, as they say. And I am hopeful, confident that we will succeed.
Thank you. Your views on the current state of the EU, of Europe?
Well, there is very little that I can add to what Ambassador Mavromichalis has just presented very comprehensively, nicely. Just perhaps only from Lithuanian point of view, a bit more of a drama and emphasis on a couple of points. Well, first of all, I mean, the war of aggression, Russian war of aggression. That is really the key issue now for Europe, and we have to really, well, EU is not a defensive alliance, but the EU has the responsibility to really, well, has the tools to really streamline the economies in the way that considerably larger share of resources would be allocated to defense. And here, well, I would say perhaps you mentioned, Petros, that well, we have increased and it should continue when it comes to investment into defense. So from Lithuanian point of view, we say that well, we have just started. The scale has to be much larger, and the pace has to be much quicker. Mm-hmm. So there, well, we really ring the bell of alarm on that. And then on the other challenge, that is de-risking. Very often we hear that is impossible, but we Lithuanians say no, nothing is impossible, because look to us. I mean, we once 30 years ago were 100% dependent on Russian market. Today 0%. Mm-hmm. And throughout those 35 years, we did not allow our economy to become dependent on China. So we are basically China risk-free today, you know. And here we again raise the flag and tell that well, de-risking should be conducted. Well, it cannot take place overnight, but cannot be conducted in one day, but in 1 year. But there should be more ambition, and it is feasible, and there has to a strong political will shown clear message to the businesses provided.
Mm-hmm. And maybe I just saw in the new von der Leyen EU Commission, the security, the defense, and the foreign affairs portfolios are in the hands of Finnish, Lithuanian, and Estonian commissioners. Maybe it's not a coincidence. I don't know, how do you see that, and how do you will this help the EU to move in the direction you just mentioned, or how do you interpret this new configuration within the EU Commission? You can for sure also react to that.
Actually, I mean, the European Union is a very complicated political animal, and there are a lot of factors that have an impact on the formation of the Commission. And of course, I mean, there are different nations, governments, institutions playing a role, people via the elected representatives to European Parliament. And but of course, the initiative is in the hands of the President of the Commission, and she, has a very clear perception and a very, I mean, right perception of the challenges, and especially taking into account her former portfolio of the Minister of Defense of Germany, and perhaps she has also some sense of how should I say, debt to the security of Europe, once having not put enough effort to really promote more German investment to defense. So she understands the challenge really, and in meeting that challenge, the zeal or the strategic communication, emotional strategic communication, I mean, based on real experience, is very important. I mean, today, when we see that there is a lack of understanding of the security, defense risks and threats in large part of Europe, and perhaps it's only on the outskirts that we feel, I mean, the real danger and the urgency of the need to do something. Perhaps these appointments will contribute to the stronger strategic communication and to more concentrated message to the general population, and hopefully that will contribute to finding, to opting for the right distribution of resources and the right steps.
Mm-hmm. And do you want to react to that?
Very briefly, I agree with everything that my colleague Darius has said. I would just add that yes, de-risking is not impossible, certainly not, but we have to be honest and state that de-risking will have a cost. So there's nothing like a free meal in any area. So it will have a cost, and we will need to explain that to our citizens, because whenever the bill comes, then very often they are up in arms. I think, you know, what you mentioned, that the security portfolios are in the hands of personalities coming from the east or the northeast, is a recognition to the fact that they have special expertise when it comes to the Russian threat and the Russian aggression. And I think we need to have the humility, some of us, to recognize that we should have listened to them before. They were right all along. But I would also add that, unfortunately, Russian aggression is the main but not the only threat to which Europe is confronted. And we are vulnerable to threats also from the south, including the Middle East and sub-Saharan Africa. And what happens in Asia, in the Asia-Pacific region, also has an impact on our security and our economies. So we don't have the luxury to focus only on one area. We have to try and deal with all the crisis with which we are faced. But as far as the East is concerned, I am convinced that we are in the right hands. Our High Representative visited Kiev on her first day of taking up her new functions, and she was extremely clear. Her message was, we need to help Ukraine win this war. She couldn't have been clearer, and this is why I repeated, this is our aim, to help Ukraine win the war.
A few days ago, I sat down with René Repasi, maybe to open a bit the discussion on the question of green transition, economy. We spoke about security already, to discuss with him the new clean industrial deal. And I suggest it will take a few minutes, but that we listen to his answers to these three questions, and then we'll move forward with our debate. Exactly. Thank you. Sorry, there is no voice-over, but please.
Die neue Europäische Kommission hat sich als Überschriften Wettbewerbsfähigkeit und Sicherheit gesetzt. Und in der Tat, der Punkt um die Industriepolitik fällt alles unter dem Stichwort der Wettbewerbsfähigkeit. Dafür hat man im Englischen jetzt ein neues Wort sich einfallen lassen mit Clean Industrial Deal. Man darf jetzt nicht mehr Green Deal sagen, sondern Clean Industrial Deal. Aber was versteckt sich dahinter? Ne? Weil es gibt natürlich große Überschriften, aber was bedeutet das ganz konkret? Ganz konkret ist es natürlich so, dass wir global in der Wettbewerbsfähigkeit als Europäische Union zurückgefallen sind. Und das hat seine Gründe und da muss man ran. Das hat auch seine Gründe, dass wir in einer Welt leben, die nicht mehr auf dem Freihandel aufgebaut ist und in der wir Blöcke haben, die auf sich gucken. Die Vereinigten Staaten unter Trump 1, aber unter Biden hat sich das nicht viel geändert. Unter Trump 2 wird das, glaube ich, noch stärker werden, dass man sehr protektionistisch auf sich schaut. China hat als Strategie ausgegeben, dass Handel ein Instrument der geostrategischen Politik ist. Und die Europäische Union hat ihr Geschäftsmodell auf offenen Grenzen und Freihandel gesetzt. Und das funktioniert so nicht mehr. Das ist auch schon in der Pandemie zusammengebrochen und da muss man sein Geschäftsmodell ändern, die Wettbewerbsfähigkeit verbessern. Und das sind Zeiten, in der sich die alte Industrie auf fossilen Brennstoffen aufbauend sich in eine neue Industrie, die grün und digital ist, umwandeln muss. Dazu muss man viel in Infrastruktur investieren, dazu muss man Energiepreise anpacken, die immer noch unter dem Ukraine-Krieg leiden und man muss dann vor allen Dingen an Innovationen rangehen. Und das ist, glaube ich, das Entscheidende. Die Vereinigten Staaten haben unter Joe Biden massiv Staatsgeld rausgeholt und haben das über die Gießkanne über dem Land ausgeschüttet. Das können wir so in Europa gar nicht. Zum einen, weil unsere Haushalte schon stark überschuldet sind und zum anderen, weil wir viele kleine Haushalte haben, aber keinen großen zentralen Haushalt. Sicherlich wäre das mal schön, in diese Richtung zu gehen, aber da sind wir weit entfernt von. Zentral bleibt daher Innovation. Rainer Schumpeter muss der nächste kreative Zerstörer eigentlich aus Europa kommen. Ich bin fest davon überzeugt, dass er oder sie auch an einer europäischen Universität bereits ist. Aber der Transfer von einer guten Idee hin zur innovativen Idee, hin zum innovativen Produkt, das dann auf den Markt aufrollen kann, da ist es extrem beschwerlich in Europa. Uns fehlt Risikokapital, uns fehlt Infrastruktur, uns fehlen die Möglichkeiten mit dem Wettbewerbsrecht, kleine Unternehmen, die gute Ideen haben, zu schützen, dass sie nicht sofort aufgekauft werden und über den Atlantik wandern. Wir brauchen öffentliche Infrastruktur, die dafür geeignet ist. Digitale Infrastruktur. In Deutschland haben wir Teile, wo man immer noch auf UMTS surfen muss. So kann man keine digitale Zukunft aufbauen in ländlichen Räumen. Und darauf setzt dann auch eben dieser Clean Industrial Deal, wohl wissend, dass es an Staatsgeld mangelt, aber dass man andere Dinge aktivieren muss. Also Innovationsförderung, Abbau von unnötiger Bürokratie und klare Förderung von Innovation. Es gibt ja sozusagen 3 Wege, die man parallel beschreiten kann mit einer sehr unterschiedlichen Intensität. Zunächst einmal, und das hat auch Draghi richtig adressiert, muss man definieren, wo man eigentlich hin möchte. Und wenn man das klar definiert hat, kann man dann schauen, wo man das Geld dafür findet. Und da gibt es zunächst mal die private Kapitalseite, die dürfen wir hier nicht aus der Verantwortung lassen. Europa hat ein großes Problem, dass seine Kapitalmärkte noch sehr fragmentiert sind. Wir sind in Europa, und das ist, glaube ich, in der Schweiz nicht viel anders, eine kreditfinanzierte Wirtschaft, während wir auf der anderen Seite des Ozeans eine equity-finanzierte Wirtschaft sind, die aber dazu führt, dass halt irgendwelche Hedgefonds oder irgendwelche anderen beim plötzlich im Unternehmen drin sitzen. Das ist nicht die Art und Weise, wie wir wirtschaften. Und aus der Konsequenz der Finanzmarktkrise haben wir unseren Banken strikte Regeln auferlegt, sodass deren Möglichkeit, Kredite auszureichen, begrenzt ist. Und wenn sie ausreichen, dann eben werden sie stark national ausgereicht, sodass wir vom Potenzial der großen Anzahl privaten Kapitals, die wir in der Europäischen Union haben, zu wenig profitieren. Da ist ein enormes Potenzial, wenn man hier die Kapitalmärkte zusammenbringt. Das wird aber nicht ausreichen, weil es auch so ist, dass Kapitalmärkte natürlich investieren in Ideen, in Dinge, bei denen es auch irgendwann einmal die Investition sich zurückzahlt. Wir haben aber gewisse öffentliche Güter, Energienetze. Wir haben derartige Dinge, wo der sogenannte Return of Investment nicht offensichtlich ist, wo vielleicht auch das Risiko zu groß ist, als dass ein privater Kapitalgeber dort hineingeht. Da muss öffentliches Kapital zur Verfügung stehen. Das kann dann über die Europäische Investitionsbank laufen, aber das muss auch in Teilen durch den Unionshaushalt gestemmt werden. Und der Unionshaushalt ist derzeit dazu nicht in der Lage. Der Unionshaushalt im aktuellen Umfang entspricht zweimal dem Land Nordrhein-Westfalen für eine gesamte Europäische Union. Das macht deutlich, dass das nicht möglich ist. Viele Gelder liegen dort bereits fest für die Landwirtschaft, für die Kohäsionspolitik, sodass man eigentlich den Umfang des Unionshaushaltes ausbauen muss, um dorthin zu kommen. Und da gibt es 2 Wege. Das eine ist, dass man nach neuen Eigenmitteln sucht. Und das ist wahrscheinlich der von den Mitgliedstaaten auch bevorzugte Weg, weil noch mehr Beiträge in den Unionshaushalt zu leisten, kommt auch in den nationalen Haushalten an seine Grenzen. Da gibt es aber Möglichkeiten. Seit Jahren fordern wir eine Finanzmarkttransaktionssteuer, deren Aufkommen in den Unionshaushalt gehen kann, weil natürlich Finanztransaktionen massiv vom Binnenmarkt profitieren. Wir haben einen Vorschlag gemacht als sozialdemokratische Fraktion einer sogenannten Binnenmarktabgabe. Das heißt, dass wirtschaftliche Tätigkeit, die unmittelbar von der Existenz des Binnenmarktes profitiert, das heißt von offenen Grenzen, dass hier ein Teil davon eingenommen werden kann, um refinanziert zu werden, etwa in Infrastrukturmaßnahmen für den Binnenmarkt und es somit zu einem Kreislauf des Ganzen kommt. Wir haben hier also auch Potenzial im Bereich der Eigenmittel noch etwas zu machen. Und dann darf die Frage der Verschuldung der Europäischen Union kein Tabu sein. Klar, verschiedenste Generationen deutscher Bundesfinanzminister haben immer rote Karten gezeigt. Aber auch hier ist es ganz klar, die Europäische Union hat einen großen Vorteil. Sie kann derzeit zumindest noch mit sogenannten AAA-Rating, das heißt mit unter günstigen Refinanzierungskosten auf privaten Märkten anleihen. Das darf nicht ins Risiko gebracht werden, aber im Rahmen der Spielräume, die es dort sind, ist es günstiger für öffentliche Interessen auch sich auf den privaten Kapitalmärkten zu verschulden, solange eben hier die Tragfähigkeit der Verschuldung gewährleistet ist. Und da gibt es auch noch Spielräume, die auch Draghi ebenfalls erkannt hat. Und daraus wird dann ein Finanzierungspaket, mit dem wir eigentlich ganz gut vorankommen können. Am Ende geht es genau darum, mit dem, was wir tun. Wir wollen, dass gut bezahlte Jobs in Europa bleiben, und zwar nicht nur in den nächsten 5 Jahren, sondern in den nächsten Jahrzehnten. Diese ganzen abstrakten Diskussionen über öffentliche Investitionen, Programme, Förderung, weiß die Teufel was, hat ja nur einen Sinn und Zweck, nämlich, dass wir die Jobs in Europa halten, die gut bezahlt sind, wie sie heute schon gut bezahlt sind. Wenn das nicht gelingt, dann brauchen wir das alles auch gar nicht. Deswegen steht das genau im Zentrum, dass die Beteiligung der Arbeitnehmerinnen und Arbeitnehmer an den Gewinnen, die die Unternehmen produzieren, dass das gesichert ist. Und dazu müssen ordentliche Gewinne produziert werden. Und die Jobs der Zukunft liegen eben nicht in der Industrie, die vor 50 Jahren den Erfolg Europas begründet hat. Die liegen in der grünen Transformation. Wenn wir uns die anderen Märkte der Welt anschauen, da sehen wir das bereits etwa im Automobilbereich. In China, in den Vereinigten Staaten, da redet man gar nicht mehr über Verbrenner aus und Sonstiges, sondern die Wachstumsmärkte ist E-Mobilität. Die europäischen Automobilhersteller sind da aber schlicht nicht wettbewerbsfähig. Sondern da kann man sagen, wir sagen den Klimawandel ab, aber das stimmt ja nicht. Denn das ist die zweite zentrale Aufgabe, neben den Jobs für alle Menschen, dass unsere Kinder und Kindeskinder eine Welt bekommen, die für sie noch lebenswert ist. Und nur weil jetzt die Fridays for Future nicht mehr auf die Straße gehen, heißt nicht, dass der Klimawandel abgesagt ist. Die wissenschaftliche Erkenntnis ist ja eindeutig. Und deswegen geht es genau darum, das zusammenzubringen. Daher wäre es total falsch, jetzt nur weil die Aufmerksamkeit auf dem Thema nicht so groß ist, das Ambitionsniveau des Green Deals herabzusenken, eben zu deregulieren, statt zu versuchen, wie kriegen wir die Unternehmen, die sich auf den Weg gemacht haben, ihr Geschäftsmodell an die grüne Zukunft anzupassen, wie helfen wir denen auf dem Weg dorthin, statt sozusagen denen, die es nicht tun oder nicht können wollen, zu helfen, im alten Geschäftsmodell zu verbleiben. Das wäre Steuergeld, Geld unserer Bürgerinnen und Bürger verpulvert.
So maybe to take on the very last point, Ambassador Mavromichalis, and to also make the bridge with the discussion we have in Switzerland, we heard the importance of supporting as a EU small and middle businesses. There is often this criticism that the EU over-regulates. We heard the term of deregulation. How do you see that? Is this criticism when we look forward in option to strengthen the competitivity? Yeah, it's a crazy term, but of the EU. How do you respond to that? This criticism is also one of one of the main ones we hear in Switzerland. Is this correct? True? Untrue?
Well, I hear this criticism as well, but what you need to understand is that the EU is in actual fact a great project of deregulation, because basically EU regulations are a substitute for 27 different regulations, even 30, 31 if we include the EEA partners and Switzerland. Instead of having 27 different standards for the production of everything from lawnmowers to dishwashers, you have one regulation. So I don't agree that there is an over-regulation. But, there are some areas which require regulation. Of course, industry hates a regulation because they would rather not be regulated, and they would rather regulate themselves. But does anyone really think that we would successfully and quickly engage in this green transition if industry, including the fossil industry or the automobile industry, had to regulate itself? We recently approved the Digital Services Act, which tries to put a little bit of order in what can be published on digital platforms, on systemic digital platforms, based on the principle that what is illegal offline should also be illegal online. Now, obviously, those who have to implement it hate it because it's an additional cost. But why have they not regulated it themselves for so many years? I mean, everybody knows that there is abuse going on those platforms. I recently watched a documentary, a Canadian documentary called Backlash, which I really recommend to all of you, which shows the toxicity of some of these digital platforms of social media. especially targeting women and young girls. I mean, I'm sorry, public authorities have a duty to protect their populations, and this is only done through regulation. Whether it is too much or too little, I do not know, but what I can assure you is that President von der Leyen put simplification and minimizing obstacles to companies, in particular SMEs, as one of the priorities of her mandate, and she instructed all the members of the Commission to work in this respect. We have a principle normally that when you propose a new text, a new piece of legislation, you should identify one that has to be scrapped. Yes, we are aware of the criticism, and we do not want to add any unnecessary burdens to our companies, but there are just some things that can only be achieved through regulation.
Maybe Ambassador Semaška, the question regarding the EU is the champion of free movement, abolition of borders, free trade, but we see in the current world that there are protectionist tendencies, and also even in the reports, Letta and Draghi reports, there are some tracks going in a direction where we could see the EU focusing more on how to strengthen its economy, its SMEs. How do you see this balance between openness and protecting its own interests in this global context?
Actually, we tend to have a look at this issue also from national security point of view. Yeah. And we had that in mind throughout our restored statehood independence after 1990. And already since 1996, we were very strictly regulating foreign investment into Lithuania and establishing certain barriers for unwanted players to come into the market. Then we later on introduced also restrictions for even technologies to be used if those technologies are produced in unwanted countries. So we definitely approach this issue from the point of view of national security. And that's why, what I mentioned before, we are now Russia-free and China-free. And actually, if we look into the EU and like-minded partners, and the transatlantic partners, countries in such countries in the Indo-Pacific as Japan, the Republic of Korea, Australia, we have enormous market, and we just have to make an effort, and we propagate that actually to remove barriers within that realm. Yeah. And actually, with regard to just EU, I mean, we always stand for really deepening the common market, because we call it common market, but there are lots of restrictions. And well, Mr. Repasi mentioned digitalization in Germany. Well, I worked in Germany, and I remember how we, the embassy, wanted to get the fiberglass in the center of Berlin, 300 meters from Reichstag, and it took 1 year and a half to get, and just because Deutsche Telekom has informal monopoly, so there's a lot of what could be done within, still could be done, and we are moving towards those ends. Within the EU to really streamline this common market and to make it a real common market, and there's huge potential in that. And with regard to making us more competitive and to increase this competitiveness.
Maybe a very quick question. Very concretely, we have now these both reports. commissioned by the EU Commission President. How does the EU plans to move, or the Commission plans to move forward? Are you able to maybe indicate, are they working groups? Will there be some proposition made to the Council and the Parliament?
Certainly. I mean, these reports should be seen as our sort of a compass for the years to come. Now, the Commission, I think, will need to come up with a roadmap that it will need to propose to the Council, because one shouldn't forget that decisions are always taken by the Council, by member states. And it will not be easy. Let's not kid ourselves. Like with foreign policy, on economic policy, we have divisions between those who put the accent on the debt brake. We have it as well. It's not a Swiss specialty, and those who would like to relaunch the economy through spending, and we will need to find the right balance. I was interested to listen to the MEP. I think that what he said, his suggestions are very reasonable. I think we need to start with the Capital Markets Union, because this will make our economies more dynamic, more efficient, and this will also avoid using taxpayers' money. But this will probably not be enough. We will need private capital. We will also need public capital. And I think there is nothing wrong in accruing debts, as long as these debts are used for a purpose such as investing in our economies, in making ourselves more competitive, because then, of course, we have a greater capability in repaying those debts, or if it is to ensure our security, because what is a low debt worth if you are not able to defend your freedom and your independence, as we have seen now with Ukraine, which of course has to use all its resources in order to be able to survive as an independent democracy faced with European aggression. So yes, difficult decisions have to be taken, but if not now, when? Given the challenges with which we are all faced.
Faced with Russian aggression. Russian aggression.
Russian aggression. What did I say?
European.
Sorry. European challenges, Russian aggression, of course. Sorry. Thank you for correcting me.
I think we have a few minutes to take, if there are some questions, within the audience. The colleagues have a microphone. Just raise your hand if you have a question. Maybe present yourself. Yes, there.
Hi, Excellencies. Thank you very much for your words. My name is Emmanuel Grimm, and I'm currently doing a PhD on Chinese-Taiwanese relations. And I found it very enlightening that you both mentioned China. Your Swiss colleagues did not. My question is, Switzerland is currently renegotiating the free trade agreement with China. Now, what is your opinion on that?
Who wants to answer? Please.
Well, in Lithuania, we have a national security strategy that was approved by the parliament in 2021. And in that national security strategy, Article number 43, if I remember correctly, says that it is obligation of Lithuanian government to facilitate the reorientation of Lithuanian businesses from autocratic totalitarian regimes to democracies. And today we trade with our more than 95% of our trade is with democracies.
Yes, please. Yeah, sure.
No, just want to add that for us, it is very clear that China is a partner, a competitor, and a rival. I think that in recent years, the third term has probably become more relevant and more important. So, you know, we have to be careful of creating dependencies, economic, but also political. The country you mentioned also interferes in many spheres of Swiss life, Swiss politics, and it's funny that I often hear that, you know, the EU is the bad guy and the Nadelstiche and so on and so forth. But, you know, I hardly ever hear about others which carry a much bigger stick than the EU and are willing to use it. So, yes, we have to be cautious. But I would also say that, of course, it is the responsibility of governments to take care of the security of its people, including economic security, of course. But we also, each one of us, have a role as citizens. You know, if you are worried about, you know, the autocratic derive of a certain country, or the fact that it employs child labor or slave labor, or that it does not correspond to our principles, you are able, in theory, not to buy their products. I mean, whenever I buy something, and I know that people consider me very strange, so you can take this as a pinch of salt. I ask, you know, where is this made? Where is this made? Where does this suit come from? Where does this shirt come from? And, you know, I will sometimes say, well, I don't buy it. It's not always easy, but it's a reflex that one can have, you know. Where does it come from? Does it come from a country, from a society that whose values are close to ours and that we want to support? If not, why do you buy it?
There is one last question. Okay.
Oui, bonjour, Patrick, je suis de Genève. Je reviens sur ce que disait M. Repasi au niveau de la taille du ménage européen, qui est trop petit, le marché financier est trop petit. Oui, mais même si on y arrivait, l'Europe resterait face à un concurrent qui n'a aucune limite sur sa dette, les États-Unis. Sky is the limit, comme ils disent, et qui en profite pour subventionner son économie de façon tout à fait sans aucun complexe. Donc comment vous voyez la concurrence avec l'Europe qui aurait une sorte de boulet au pied avec son orthodoxie au propos de la dette, et un grand concurrent qui n'en a absolument apparemment rien à faire?
Est-ce que vous voulez répondre? Or do you want to...
Je crois qu'il faut regarder le monde tel qu'il est et pas tel que nous souhaiterions qu'il le soit. Il est clair que nous devons remettre en cause certains de nos préceptes d'orthodoxie économique. Je crois que nous y avons fait allusion. Après, si les Américains sont en mesure d'avoir une dette aussi élevée et de l'utiliser pour subventionner leur économie, c'est aussi parce que leur monnaie est la monnaie de réserve pour les transactions internationales. Donc, je veux dire, il faut essayer de faire en sorte que progressivement, l'euro, non pas remplace le dollar, mais devienne aussi une monnaie refuge. Donc voilà, nous devons nous adapter, de dire voilà, les autres font ceci, donc on n'a aucune chance, ça je ne l'accepte pas. Nous avons des possibilités. Si déjà nous arrivons à davantage mobiliser l'épargne européenne, qui est considérable, parce que les Américains n'épargnent pas, les Américains consomment. Et c'est pour cela d'ailleurs que les États-Unis ont un déficit commercial aussi colossal avec nous, c'est parce qu'ils consomment beaucoup plus. Donc nous consommons moins, nous épargnons, mais si cette épargne pouvait être canalisée de façon productive pour financer la transition verte, pour financer les infrastructures, pour financer notre effort de défense, ce serait déjà un énorme pas en avant.
Yeah.
Oui, maybe I say it in English because on technical terms, I'm a bit better in English. I'm very sorry for my Swiss patriotism. No, I mean, I don't think the financial market of Europe is too small. I think it's not enough integrated, and this is what René Repasi said. And one thing that I'm really, as a European, that I'm really afraid of is that narrow national interests could somehow block an overcoming of that not integrated capital market, because what happens now is that a lot of European capital, also a lot of the assets in Europe, they just flow to the US because there is a better investment situation. And if we saw what happened with Unicredit and Commerzbank, where German Chancellor Scholz intervened and said, no, I don't want to have like a German capital maybe invested in another European country, this is like the beginning of the problem. So do you think that Europe will somehow overcome these narrow national interests, and that we will have in Europe really a single capitals market, or how do you see that? Because I think this is maybe the easiest reform, but also a very difficult one in reality.
Do you want to? Maybe I can.
Yeah.
It would be great an answer on that, and maybe you could both also let us know how do you see the future for Europe in a conclusive way. But do you want to start?
Yeah. Well, if we look retrospectively what we have achieved by now, so of course, I mean, we have full ground to look optimistically to the future. We will go. I mean, towards this, we'll be moving towards this unified common market and also the common market for capital, well, sooner or later we will achieve that stage based on what we have managed to achieve so far, but of course when it now. Again, I return back to national security and to security challenges that we have in the east and in the south. And first of all, today, it's an issue of this day. That is, we have to really concentrate all our resources on defense.
Well, what I would say, and also we're close to Christmas, so you know, if I could write a letter to Santa Claus and ask for one thing, which I think would be decisive, would be let's do away with vetoes. The cancer with which we have been affected is called the veto. Wherever we have to decide unanimously, it is extremely difficult, except in the most extreme circumstances, such as the Russian aggression against Ukraine, to take decisions. And, you know, this is valid for the EU. It is also valid elsewhere. Look at the United Nations Security Council. It is completely paralyzed because of vetoes. So, you know, if we could, in the EU, take decisions based on qualified majority, as we are already able to do in a lot of fields, we would be able to decide faster and certainly more efficiently. It's not a guarantee that you will always get it right, because the majority, unfortunately, is not always right. You know that in Switzerland as well. But at least you are able to decide, you know, not every country will hold on to its selfish, nationalistic interest, as you mentioned quite rightly, John. So, you know, there are calls to do away with vetoes by a number of member states, including important big member states, which in the past had been reluctant. So I am cautiously optimistic that one day maybe we will get there. and that would enable us to be much more efficient.
Do you want to react? Otherwise, very good. Thank you very much. I think we'll stick to that. Thank you for your inputs. We have now enough to continue the discussion on the future of Europe at during the lunch break. It was a pleasure to have you both here. Thank you also to René Repasi. We can applaud them and